To perform a bodyweight box or bench squat, you'll need a bench that's set up at a comfortable squat height. If you're brand new to squatting, if you have any kind of back or hip or knee injuries, I would always recommend starting at a much higher elevation and focusing more on the hip portion of the movement maybe, or the knee portion of the movement, depending on where your injuries lie. And then as you get more comfortable, you can lower the height of the bench or the box. So I'm more comfortable with squats, so I do have a lower box here, but you could start with something even as high as like mid-thigh level and just barely plop onto the box just to get used to the range of motion at first. So you're gonna start with your feet at about a shoulder width wide. That's gonna be standard squatting position. So heels about as wide as your shoulders. Toes generally will turn out at least a little bit, 35 to 45 degrees. You're gonna keep your chest elevated throughout the duration of the movement. So we're trying to not get a ton of rounding or a ton of forward lean. There's gonna be a little bit just because of the hip movement, but we're trying not to completely double over as you're squatting. So we're simultaneously trying to bend at the knees and the hips. So just for a standard box squat, you'll see here, I got my hands at my chest just as a guide and just for somewhere to put my hands. Hands can also go in front of you, behind your head, wherever is gonna help with maintaining good posture. You're gonna squat your hips down and back. So notice my knees are bending, my hips are bending. I'm sending my weight back and I can actually feel my weight almost at like the front portion of my heels. So I'm not keeping my weight on my toes, but I'm not necessarily flopping all the way back onto the box. I've got my weight almost centered in the middle of my feet, squatting down, and I can control the entire portion of the movement. So if at any point I decide I don't want to touch the box, I can just come right back up, and this is going to be a great precursor for adding in weight afterwards. So now if you do have any other kind of injury, what I will sometimes do with clients is we will change the emphasis of the movement. So if you've got a lot of issues going on in the hips and you don't want as much hip bend, you'll have a much higher box and you can do a little bit more bend in the knees, and that'll be okay through a limited range of motion until you get used to it, and then you can gradually increase, even doing the same thing, emphasizing the knee bend. If you've got a knee issue, which is a little bit more common, we'll focus a bit more on the hips. So we might break at the hips a little bit more, keep the shins more vertical, or maybe even butt the feet up to the box just so you can feel that contact with the calves. And then we'll be setting the hips back a whole lot. So this is a bit low for that. But generally you can do that and have more work done on the hips and just get used to getting through that squatting range of motion through the hips rather than emphasizing the knees. So you can experiment with this exercise a lot of different ways. Notice that I used a lower box and I actually turned it and put my feet around the actual corner of the box. That's just so that I feel more stable, but you could also do it on the edge of the box. You could do it on the side of a bench, on the end of the bench. Try to find what works best for you, and you can use this exercise for all kinds of different things.